Welcome back to the C Morning Show. It's time for our first discussion of the day. Inflation and recession have become the hot topic issues worldwide, and we here in Indonesia are no exception. So what are the causes of an economic recession? Well, it can vary, starting from inflation, economic shocks, deflation, as well as technological developments.
No, so how does a country now avoid recession, and what are the strategies required to deal with it? To answer our questions, let's hear from our Economist and Celios Director, Bhima Yudhistira, joining live with us online. Good morning, Mas Bhima. It's always a great pleasure to have you right here in our show.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Mas Bhima.
Pleasure to meet all of you also.
Thank you so much. Now, Mas Bhima, we're going to straight ahead go into our first question. Now, from a recent survey, Indonesia was included in the list of countries at risk of economic recession. Can you tell us and elaborate more of our current situation regarding the global recession, Mas Bhima?
Yeah, that's true that we are just below Thailand, below the other Southeast Asian countries in terms of the probability of the recession. So it means that Indonesian economy fundamentally is still strong, still resilient. And why is that? Because we have a very low inflation rate compared with the peers. Let's see that Turkey, Sri Lanka, even some countries in the Southeast Asia, they have a 5%, 6%, even 50% inflation rate. Meanwhile, Indonesia inflation just stood up at 4.3% in the June. And then the government still subsidized the fuel, even though the non-subsidized fuel is keep increasing rate. LPG also increase, electricity increase for non-subsidized. But for the subsidized, the government still provide more than 520 trillion rupiah this year alone to sustain and maintain the inflation rate from the energy side. And also, we see that the windfall of the commodity price from the coal, from the CPO or palm oil, nickels, is helping a lot of our fiscal budgets. So we have enough money or fund to sustain maintaining low inflation rate, at least until June or until last month. But this semester, I think, will be very challenging because the US dollar is gaining a strong moment, even not only against rupiah, but also against the other major currency like the euro, pound sterling also. And then the increased rate of the Federal Reserve benchmark rate, it will be increase the cost of fund of many of the industry players, consumers in many of the export destination countries like China, US, Europe. So it also decreasing the surplus of Indonesia current trade.
Mas Bhima, we mentioned, inflation is just a small piece of an economic recession. We've seen, in fact, a neighboring country of Sri Lanka, for example, is just far beyond what we're experiencing here in Indonesia. But what are some of the indicators when a country is actually going to experience a recession? What are some of the signs that we can look for?
So actually, recession is a condition that 2 or more quarters, 3 or 4 quarters, that the economy is keep declining.
Okay.
So, for instance, in the US, the first quarter is a negative growth, and the second quarter will be projection negative growth also. So the US technically in the recessions. But also there are another factors, for instance, the job opportunity. So when the inflation increase, but the job opportunity is decreasing, I think that's also a sign of the recessions. So the balance between the affordability of the food, of the energy, of some of the workers, poverty level increase, that also damaging the growth of the economy. That's sign of a recession also.
Right.
Yeah, and we see a lot of worlds happening right now that have affect and made a pivotal impact to the inflation, also recession. Now, when a country is to face recessions, what are the strategy for the country preparedness for the recession itself?
Yeah, I think the government should all out for the food and energy price stability to maintain, subsidize, and also increase the purchasing power of the middle and lower income status people or workers, and still giving a lot of fiscal stimulus, monetary stimulus, and to maintain the climate of the business is conducive because we are in the near term of the elections. Next year will be beginning of the elections process, and I think many of the business will look out about the regulations that coming into recessions, how to mitigate that kind of global tensions, and to maintain political stability. I think that's a full tax to the government, but I still believe that we still have a fiscal space, we still maintain low inflation rate. I think the probability of Indonesia getting into recessions um, will be like a lower compared with the others emerging market country for now. What we still see that the increase of the debt level, increase of the debt service ratio is also kind of a sign that the government must see and must control that, because if the increase of the debt service ratio is not met with the tax ratio standard, it means that there will be like a weakening fiscal sustainability. So I think this is a very long run game because we don't know exactly when the war in Ukraine will be stopped and when the oil price will be decreased. So we still to maintain the fiscal health, monetary stability, I think in the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I like what you said there, Masbima, that we should play the long game here. And as if I'm going by your definition of a recession, which is more than 2 quarters, for example, 3 or 4 quarters of economic downturn is considered a recession. I have a 2-part question. How long can a country sustain a decline in their economy? Does it actually make it harder the longer they go in a sort of recession in order for them to get out of it? And then what is the long-term impact of a recession on a country once it's suffering one?
So for instance, we look about the Sri Lanka data. So the Sri Lanka data, when they having a food and energy crisis problems leading into high inflation rate, and then the economy began to the recessions, the next step will be the default of their sovereign bond payment. And if there is a default and then the government lose the control of the society and the legitimacy of the government is very weak, and it can be leading into what we call it failure states.
Okay.
It's not only default but also failure states. So prolong the recessions, I think there will be like a very high risk that the government leading into failed state status.
Okay.
So I think for Indonesian perspective, we have recession indeed in 2020 during the pandemic, but it's only 1 year. 2021, our economic growth positively, and I think it's continue until the second quarter this year.
Right.
So mitigating the risk of the recessions, not too long, I think that's the best suitable purposes and aim for Indonesia to maintain economic growth again.
Right, especially when the public hear that you are in a recession, it worries and it gives worriness to the people itself, because
Right.
when you heard the recession, we're thinking, okay, is the country is going to collapse or whatnot?
Right, but then when you have governments and economists actually already anticipating once
Yeah.
you have a slow quarter,
Yeah.
then you're already kind of anticipating a few steps ahead. You're not going to wait until you have 2 or 3
Right.
or 4 slow quarters
Yeah.
before you do something about it.
Right, and it's good that you touch base on anticipating, because our next question is, how can a country avoid or even prepared or survive a recession then, Masbima?
Yeah, I think it's not only the government's job to surviving the recessions, but also the private sectors and the whole society as well. So fortunately, that Indonesia have 60 million small medium enterprise. I think this is a very good backbone of the Indonesian economy, that we see that some of the small medium enterprise now begin to financing again, begin to raise capital, begin to expand their business because of the decreasing level of the pandemic of the COVID-19. I think that's a very good sign to start, especially in the constructions and then electricity, automotive industry, and agriculture also.
Sorry to cut you off, Masbima. Why
Yeah.
in particular MSMEs are important in getting out of and avoiding a recession?
Yeah, I think previously we study from the historical recessions from 1998, Asian financial recession or crisis,
Right.
2008 and 2013 temper tantrum, where the small medium enterprise playing a role to absorb employment. So when the formal sectors hit by the downturn in the economic situations, so many of the layoff absorbed in the small medium enterprise.
I see.
And the contribution is 97% of total workforce work in the small medium enterprise recently.
That's huge.
So I think it's a huge benefit that
Yeah.
Indonesia have a strong fundamental because of the small medium enterprise.
Right. Okay. Anyway, go on. Go on, Mas Bima. Didn't mean to cut you off.
Right. Yeah, but there's also some challenge from the small medium enterprise because many of the countries abroad they strong not only about the amount of the small medium enterprise, but also how to scale up this small medium enterprise into export oriented, also into at least large company. So we're not only talking about small and the next year keep small or micro level,
Right.
but how to scale up.
Right.
And this is need some collaboration with the state-owned enterprise, government procurement to help scaling up the small medium enterprise.
Yeah.
Right, indeed. Also, I've heard that people are always saying, oh my gosh, are we headed to a recession or the economy's slow right now? The best thing we can actually do, just as you and me, regular people, consumers, is don't hold on to your money. Don't get scared and suddenly, I don't want to shop because of inflation or prices are high. What we should be doing is supporting our economy by continuing to do what we do. If you were already planning on buying a car or that house, continue to do so. Yes, the interest rates may be a little bit higher.
Right.
But the worst thing we can do for our economy right now is everybody stuffing their money underneath their mattresses and just hanging on to it because it's just going to make it worse.
Right, and support local businesses as what mentioned by Mas Bima. This is what we have to really support so then they can really engage and scale up.
Absolutely. Mas Bima, thank you so much for your time. Always great catching up with you and getting your
welcome.
insights. I always feel a little bit better talking to you in regards to the economy.
Feel more confident, don't you, now to walk the days. Thank you, Mas Bima.
Have a great day, Mas Bima. Take care.
Yeah, thank you.
You know what? I think that our government is navigating us on the correct way because
Yes.
you know what Mas Bima has just mentioned about MSMEs and whatnot. And we've been hearing this and how the government has been engaged with the MSMEs for now since the pandemic.
Yeah.
They kept on educating. They kept supporting them and whatnot.
Adjusting protocols about COVID-19
Right.
too. Remember that? Just
Yeah.
allowing people to run their small businesses, but having to just adjust a bit.
Because
by
it
bit.
makes sense. Because if those people are not producing, they're not being creative, whatnot.
People
that kind
aren't
of
working.
stalled on the low-income society.
Yeah, if
Right.
you're not working and you're not making money, how are you going to spend the money anyway, right?
My goodness.
All right.